Good to have you with us on this Monday. I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Savannah Sellers. We get started this morning on the presidential campaign trail with both President Biden and former President Donald Trump ramping up their efforts to rally voters as we move closer to the November election.
The Biden campaign says it raised more than $30 million over the weekend at a celebrity-filled fundraiser held in Los Angeles. The president spoke to a star-studded crowd featuring some famous faces. Former President Barack Obama, George Clooney, Julia Roberts, and Jimmy Kimmel were all there. Mr. Biden discussed major policy issues while also touching on the possible consequences of a second Trump term in office. As for Mr. Trump, he campaigned in Michigan, hoping to sway black voters. The former president spoke to potential voters at a Detroit church before holding a larger rally later in the day. Michigan is a key battleground state. Mr. Biden won it by less than 3 points just 4 years ago, while Mr. Trump narrowly won it in 2016. Our political team is here to recap this weekend's events, including NBC News correspondent Von Hilliard and NBC News senior national politics reporter John Allen. Let's begin with NBC News White House correspondent Ali Rafa. Ali, good to have you with us. So this is President Biden's second VIP-packed fundraising event this year. The last one just a few months ago across the street here in New York at Radio City. How did this one compare to his first one? What was the main message during this weekend's event?
Yeah, guys, good morning. Well, that star-studded fundraiser back in March in New York City with the president brought in $26 million. This fundraiser this weekend in California outraised that, according to the Biden campaign, bringing in more than $30 million. And during this fundraiser, the president had a wide-ranging conversation with Jimmy Kimmel as well as former President Obama, hitting on a lot of issues. They talked about misinformation on social media from the president's G7 summit in Italy last week. They also talked about what he sees as his achievements during his first year in office, what he would do if he wins another term in the White House. And he also made the case for what he would do if reelected, especially contrasting that with what former President Trump has said he would do if he gets another term in the White House. And all of this is in an effort to really keep momentum building as we enter this critical stretch of the campaign, all part of an effort to really counter these low approval ratings that we've seen for the president, as well as concerns about his age, you guys.
Ali, one of the things that the president really zeroed in on when it comes to contrasting the two seats on the Supreme Court, he started to make that a campaign issue. What did he say?
Yeah, the president has usually shied away from denouncing or slamming the actual Supreme Court itself, but he has not been shy about denouncing specific decisions that the court has made. And that really took a turn during this fundraiser. Some of his sharpest remarks were about the Supreme Court. He said that the next president will likely get to nominate 2 justices, calling that reality scary and saying that this right-leaning court is out of step with Americans. As you'll remember, his predecessor nominated 3 of the 6 conservative justices who now control the 9-member court. And we have some audio from his fundraiser. Take a listen to part of that.
Elect me again. I'll tell you why. No, I'm not just saying. The next president is likely to have 2 new Supreme Court nominees. 2 more. 2 more. The idea that if he's reelected, he's going to appoint 2 more flying flags upside down is really, I really mean it. The Supreme Court has never been as out of kilter as it is today. I mean, never.
The president, in those comments, referring to the controversy around Justice Alito, who allowed flags associated with the effort to overturn the 2020 election to be flown outside of 2 of his homes. So all of this really a much sharper approach, a much sharper attacks from President Biden on the issue of the Supreme Court.
I mean, yeah, Ali, sticking with that, it's been nearly 2 years since Roe versus Wade was overturned. The Biden administration is looking to mark the date by holding dozens of events focused on reproductive rights across key battleground states. What is the strategy here?
Yeah, and we've seen the White House really lean into that decision almost 2 years ago, over the last 2 years. We're expecting that to continue and really only sharpen in the coming week as we approach the 2-year anniversary of the Dobbs decision to overturn Roe v. Wade. The Biden campaign saying that it plans to mark that anniversary by barnstorming battleground states, sending the president, the vice president, surrogates, celebrities, all across battleground states like Nevada, Georgia, Pennsylvania, Michigan, really calling attention to the personal stories of people who have been impacted by that decision and really reminding Americans of what they say is at stake if former President Trump wins another term in the White House. And you'll remember that anniversary comes just days before President Biden and former President Trump are set to face off for the first time on the general election debate stage. So the Biden campaign says that they plan to use this opportunity to talk about the stakes of the election, as well as remind Americans of what former President Trump has said about abortion, you guys.
All right, Ali Rafa kicking us off this hour. Ali, thank you.
Well, let's take a closer look at the Supreme Court piece of this. As we mentioned, President Biden said he thinks, quote, one of the scariest parts of Donald Trump potentially getting reelected would be the possibility for Mr. Trump to appoint 2 more Supreme Court justices.
The president pointed out that during his term in the White House, Mr. Trump appointed conservative justices who played a pivotal role in overturning Roe versus Wade.
NBC News senior national politics reporter John Allen joins us with more on this. John, good morning. So Supreme Court justices, they are on the bench for life once they are appointed. Do you think this is a motivating issue for voters? Do seats on the court get people out to the polls?
Yeah, good morning, Savannah. Good morning, Joe. And Joe, by the way, amazing suit. You're killing it this morning with that with that collar.
Right?
You can borrow it, John. Just
Joe
let me know when you need
I'm
it.
talking to Joe Fire.
What'd you say, Joe Fire? Cute.
But let's go back to the Supreme Court for a minute. Yeah, I think voters really care about who's on the Supreme Court. Not always, but certainly in the wake of the Dobbs decision, you can see why there are many voters, both those who support abortion rights, reproductive rights, and those who want to see abortion ended, who understand very much the importance of who's on that court. So absolutely a voting issue in 2024.
I mean, when you look across the broad spectrum of issues that people take into account, you got the economy, foreign policy, the border, things like that. How strong an argument is President Biden making for his own reelection by focusing on the Supreme Court? We know it's worked at the state level over the last 2 years for Democrats, but how about on the national level?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's it's big with his base. It may be able to help him get some people who might not otherwise have voted, but who are charged up about the court, particularly over that Dobbs decision, to get out to the polls. I'm generally of the view that if you're talking about persuadable voters, the economy is the biggest issue, not by a little bit, not by a bit, but by a ton. If he is talking about other issues than the economy, he may be missing opportunities to persuade voters. And, the other question here with what he said about the Supreme Court is it could be 2 justices, it could be no justices, it could be 9 justices, unless he's, sitting up in heaven with God, making calls or foreseeing when people are going to die or retire. He really doesn't know. And Clarence Thomas and Samuel Alito, the 2 justices he is presumably talking about with the upside-down flying flags, they are both younger than Joe Biden, not only now, but they will be younger at the end of the next presidential term than Joe Biden is now. Mm. So there could be a lot of pressure on them to retire because they are older justices, but there is no mandate for them to do so. And, compared to the president, they're spry 74 and 75-year-olds respectively.
I know we just dug in on the particular picks of Trump being part of what overturned Roe v. Wade, but just remind us, both Biden and Trump's track record when it comes to Supreme Court appointments.
So Trump's is shorter. Of course, he was, president for 4 years and appointed Brett Kavanaugh and appointed Neil Gorsuch and appointed Amy Coney Barrett. And he has, basically used the court as a way to prove himself to conservatives. Not just with those picks, but in his rhetoric, and in his decision-making, having put out lists in the past of who he might put on the court and then picking from those lists. Joe Biden has a much longer record with the Supreme Court. He was at one point chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee and has overseen these things before. So they both have a lot to talk about.
All right, John Allen, thank you very much.
A cranberry-colored suit is on the way to you in the mail. All right, the presumptive Republican presidential nominee, Mr. Trump, headlined the Turning Point Action Convention in downtown Detroit on Saturday.
This marks the second time in 2 weeks that the former president has headlined an event organized by the conservative group. Mr. Trump also took part in an outreach event at a predominantly black church, claiming that President Biden was, quote, the worst president for black people, and making the argument that the black community was being most impacted by illegal immigration.
Joining us now, NBC News correspondent Vaughn Hilliard. Vaughn, good morning. So we know Turning Point has become one of the most active conservative organizations in the country. It's closely tied with the Trump campaign. Mr. Trump's speech over the weekend lasted nearly an hour and a half. Any headlines come out of this?
You know, guys, this for Donald Trump here, Michigan was a state that he lost in 2020 by about 150,000 votes. So he has to make inroads among several different communities. And one of those communities could very well be black voters, particularly in the greater Detroit area, where he made these remarks here over the course of this weekend. And you saw him focus on not only the idea that the election was stolen from him, continually repeating that and coming back to that and making himself out to be a sympathetic figure in American politics today, 4.5 months out from the election. But you also heard him talk about the opportunity zones, which were created in low-income communities. This was legislation that was passed back in 2017. It was shepherded through the U.S. Congress in part by Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina, who is one of those individuals who is up for VP consideration. He is somebody, as a black man, who could potentially be an asset to him as a running mate. And you saw the likes of Byron Donalds, a Florida congressman, another black man who in part helped introduce Donald Trump over the weekend, is somebody who is also potentially a VP pick here. And so for not only Turning Point, but the Trump campaign, they see Michigan as a place and an opportunity to try over the course of the next four and a half months to drill home a message, not only an economic one, but also one that reflects to a greater part of the American electorate that they believe they can make inroads among.
And Vaughn, tell us about some of the other Republican politicians who spoke at this convention, and if any of this was a sense of anybody making their case to be Mr. Trump's running mate.
Right, absolutely, with Tim Scott, Byron Donalds, but you also had the likes of J.D. Vance, who was the Ohio senator, who he was asked the direct question from that Turning Point stage there about potentially being his VP. And he made it clear that whether it's him or anybody else, the goal come 2025 for Republicans must be to work with other Republicans and unite in an effort to push through legislation and get it to what would be President Trump's desk. And, you know, this is a refrain that I often hear from among folks when they reflect on Donald Trump's first term, is that there were too many individuals who were blocking the efforts and that the Republicans need to coalesce in support and that Donald Trump should be the leader of that. And so when you see somebody like a J.D. Vance, who was a one-time critic of Donald Trump and called himself even a never-Trumper 8 years ago, it's that sort of messaging that Donald Trump wants to hear from his potential running mate.
So, Vaughn, when we talk about Mr. Trump trying to make his case to black voters, what is his pitch, and are there any signs it's actually resonating?
Right. I think that that's the question. Are there signs that it's resonating? If you go to, look at some of the crowds for his rallies, there's definitely more diversity than we have seen in years past. And polling would suggest that he could very well make a dent among black America. He did in the 2020 election receive about 12% of support among black voters, which was a record for any GOP nominee dating back decades. And so he had already shown an ability to win over at least a portion of the black electorate. However, in order to make a really sizable dent and really make an impact in a state like Michigan here, he's going to have to perform better. And so Donald Trump has consistently tried to make an appeal that he is, is a candidate who is able to reach a more diverse subsect of the American electorate. Yet we have seen over the last 2 election cycles, Donald Trump repeatedly struggle to make that sort of an impact or those sort of inroads. So he's hoping that 2024, with a more direct message, it gives him the opportunity to do that.
All right. Vaughn Hilliard, thank you very much. Well, we have breaking news from Israel this morning where Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu announced he has disbanded his war cabinet with no plans to replace the coalition. It comes just a week after cabinet member Benny Gantz left along with 2 other members. The coalition was initially created just days after the October 7th attack to manage the campaign against Hamas. Netanyahu is expected to get final approval for future war decisions from the wider security cabinet. Meanwhile, Israel's military says it will be pausing all fighting during daylight hours to get long-awaited humanitarian aid into Gaza. NBC News international correspondent Rav Sanchez has the details.
Hey there, a major shakeup in Israel today as Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu announces he is dissolving the war cabinet that has been responsible for managing the war in Gaza these last 8 months. Now remember, this unity cabinet was kind of a team of rivals. It included Netanyahu's political rivals who joined the Israeli government just after the October 7th attacks. They have now resigned from that body, saying they disagree with Netanyahu's vision for the future of the war, and the cabinet itself has now been dissolved. Now, this comes amid tensions between the Israeli government and the Israeli military over humanitarian aid inside of Gaza. The Israeli military announcing over the weekend it is putting in place these daily pauses of 11 hours to allow more humanitarian aid in through a specific area. This is eastern Rafah, near the Kerem Shalom crossing. The far right of Benjamin Netanyahu's government is blasting this decision. They say there should be less aid going to civilians in Gaza, not more. They say whoever made the decision to allow the aid in is a fool who should not be allowed to stay in his position. And an Israeli official is saying that Prime Minister Netanyahu himself apparently was unaware of this decision. He says it's unacceptable and that the fighting will continue in other areas of Rafah, specifically the west of that region near the coast, as previously planned. Now, all of this is happening during the Islamic holiday of Eid. You have families in Gaza who are trying to celebrate what is supposed to be a time of happiness, when parents buy their children new clothes, when families get together, and instead this is a holiday being celebrated among the horrors of war. Back to you.
Ralph, thank you very much.
Get ready. The forecast calls for some dangerously high temps to scorch states from coast to coast this week.
Yeah, this morning, millions of Americans are waking up under heat alerts as extreme weather is forecasted to hit major cities across the country, with temperatures expected to reach 10 to 25 degrees above normal through Friday and beyond.
NBC News correspondent Maggie Vespa joins us now from Detroit, which is one of those areas. Maggie, good morning. From where you are to the Midwest, to the East Coast, to Denver, Phoenix, out west. Temps expected to soar near triple digits. First of all, what's the weather like where you are this morning?
Oh, guys, it's just perfect for heat coverage, isn't it? Look at this rain. This is exactly what you want when your producers decide that we're going to do this from Detroit. But this is kind of a flukish front that's moving through and speaks to sort of the insanity that's expected to be this week when it comes to weather, because we have temperatures set to soar into the mid to upper 90s later on today. So we are welcoming this here in Detroit because this is kind of the last gasp of relief before temperatures here, and as you point out, across much of the U.S. soar to as much as 20 to 25 degrees above average. And keep in mind, guys, the summer solstice is later on this week, meaning summer hasn't even officially started yet, and we're already off and running, clearly.
Maggie, we've seen this heat for a while now. The South has been baking. In Atlanta, temperatures reached mid-upper 90s over the weekend already. That's the hottest the city has seen so far this year, and quite early. How have people been managing in this heat?
I mean, a lot of people told us that their Father's Day celebrations yesterday were exclusively indoors. Like if they had any plans to go out and go for like a walk or a hike, or Dad wants to go play golf, a lot of those plans were canceled yesterday, with people just kind of resigning themselves to going to a movie or having a nice meal inside. Those are great things, but they said it was kind of a last-minute change as this heat wave rolled in and really caught everybody off guard. This is the first major heat wave of 2024, and the thing about this that is so key is the National Weather Service says it's supposed to be some of the longest, or one of the longest heat waves a lot of parts of the country have ever seen. We're talking about a really stubborn heat dome that, as you point out, may last into the weekend for a lot of places, and it really came up fast for a lot of people. So they're adjusting quickly, for sure.
And we know what these temps can mean for folks on the West Coast. We already see the high temperatures fueling wildfires in California. What's the latest there?
Yeah. The latest there is that there are multiple, and firefighters really have their hands full, you know, and we feel like we see this every year, and we're, again, just that phrase, off and running already this season. We're watching one in Gorman, California. That's north of L.A. I believe it's already more than 15,000 acres, and over the weekend it forced 1,000 people to evacuate from a nearby state park there. And then there's another one up in wine country that's also been raging throughout the weekend, raging for days. Firefighters getting a handle on that one, which is obviously great news to hear, but you're right. this heat, these temperatures, the dryness already having that impact out west. And now we're kind of seeing it slowly moving as this dome expands across the entire country, guys.
All right, Maggie Vespa, stay cool and stay dry.
Yes, exactly. That's a lot of fun. All right, while you try to cool off, we're going to keep our heat coverage going with meteorologist Michelle Grossman.
We're staying cool and dry. Good morning, Michelle.
Hi there, guys. Yeah, it's really cool in the studio, and it's going to stay cool because it's always been cool here. But we are looking at dangerous heat as we go throughout the week, as Maggie said. She mentioned those daytime highs. They are going to be drastic with 10, 25 degrees above normal, and it's going to be a long duration, but also at night. We're not going to get that relief. That's when it gets particularly dangerous. So coast-to-coast heat as we go throughout the next 5 days. That's where you see all this red coloring here. And we're going to see 264 million Americans with temperatures above 90 degrees this week. And as Maggie mentioned, summer doesn't arrive until Thursday. So waking up this morning, or walking out the door, I should say, 66 million people impacted by heat alerts today. We're looking at heat advisories. That's in the orange. Heat warnings in that lighter pink, and the darker pink, almost red, is a heat watch. So all the way from the Midwest or the Ohio Valley, the Great Lakes, into the Northeast and some parts of New England. Now, remember, some parts of New England, you don't have air conditioning. You typically don't need it very often, but we're looking at temperatures soaring this week. So that's particularly dangerous as well. Look at some of these temperatures today. We're going to break records. We're looking at 91 degrees in some spots, 97 in Chicago, 93 in Indianapolis. The record there is 95. Columbus, 94. Syracuse, even 93 degrees. The record there is 93. So we'll see how many records we break over the next 5 days. Then tomorrow, same story. This is where we really start to see that heat pump kick into the Northeast. Now, these are the air temperatures. You factor in the humidity in a lot of spots. It will feel like over 100 degrees, especially by Thursday and Friday. So by tomorrow, Cleveland, 94, 97 in Syracuse, 95 in Newark. The record there is 97, 90 in Bangor, Maine, and we're looking at 91 degrees in Boston. And then there's no relief as we go throughout the late week. We're looking at temperatures well into the 90s, near 100 degrees in Syracuse on Thursday, into the 90s in New York City, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Friday's going to be a tough day because it will feel like over 100 degrees there in Boston. We're looking at temperatures, too, into the upper 90s. So a dangerous heat wave. We talk about these numbers, but where does it correspond to how we're feeling, the effects on us? Just looking at the color corresponding here, where you see the purple, that is an extreme risk. So portions of the Midwest into the Great Lakes, parts of New England, the interior parts of the Northeast as well. If you're outside for a long duration, and there's a lot of people who need to work outdoors, that can be deadly. If you don't hydrate, if you don't take cover under shade, you need to heed all the warnings that we hear. And this is why we have these heat alerts in place. The National Weather Service is giving us a heads up that we need to take action at least through this week, especially through the later part of this week. This is going to prompt more dry weather in portions of the Southwest. So a fire threat does continue. 12 million people impacted where you see the pink. That is not the only story. This is going to be another big story as well. We have tropical moisture, could become a tropical system as we go throughout this week, where a low is going to develop in the Gulf. We're going to see tropical moisture moving across the Gulf Coast states. We could see up to 8 inches in some spots. Wow. So we're going to watch that very closely as well. And then we have a severe weather threat in portions of the plains and also the Midwest.
Okay, a busy week for you.
Weather.
And also accumulating snow in the Northern Rockies today.
Late spring.
Accumulating snow. There's winter storm warnings in the Northern Rockies.
Oh, okay. In June.
At the same time that nearby is fire warnings.
I know,
that is
crazy.
Really scary. All right, thank you, Michelle.
Thank you, Michelle.
Sure.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.